Welcome to your daily dose of sci-fi adventures. New stories dropped every single day. Smash that subscribe button and ring the to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and unlock even more epic cosmic tales. The thunder of distant stars was nothing compared to the roar in Garen Hale's ears as the Vraxxer dreadnought descended through the swirling emerald clouds of Dravik Prime. He had never felt fear so pure, so absolute. His slender frame, barely 14 by Terran reckoning, trembled beneath the weight of heavy restraints that bit into his wrists. Yet even shackled, Garen pressed his forehead to the viewport of the holding cell's transport tube, trying to memorize every jagged mountain peak, every rolling forest canopy, every silver ribbon of river far below. This world, alien and beautiful, would become his tomb. A month earlier, aboard the United Coalition survey ship Antares, Garen had lost everything. He'd been exploring an uncharted stellar nursery with his mother, Dr. Sana Hale, an expert in extrasolar biospheres, and his father, Dr. Caleb Hale, renowned for his work in xenopsychology. They'd detected a faint Signalan artifact, perhaps drifting in the void. Garen, ever curious, had slipped away from his parents' side to poke at a glowing console. Within seconds, the Vraxxer struck, ruthless pale-skinned soldiers overwhelming the Coalition escort vessels, snatching Garen in the mayhem. His parents had screamed his name as the beam closed around him, and then they were gone, lost somewhere in the wreckage of the Antares. Now Garen's only family was the unknown, terrors waiting beyond the transport tube. The chamber he stepped into was carved from crimson-veined obsidian, the walls slick with moisture that hissed as molten lava poured through channels. Gigantic chains dangled from the high ceiling, clinking ominously. Geysers of violet steam hissed from vents. The air burned his eyes. It smelled of sulfur, scorched metal, and something ancient. To Vraxxer jailers tall as Terran skyscrapers, limbs all sharp angles yanked Garen forward. Light caught on their pale, reflective skin, making them look almost translucent. Their multi-jointed limbs moved in precision jerks. Garen's feet slid on the heated stone floor as they shoved him toward a vast circular pit. From its depths rose an otherworldly glow, rivers of molten bronze lighting the cavern like molten suns. At the far side of that pit stood the prison's gates, a set of colossal bronze doors, covered in draconic runes that pulsed with ember light. The runes writhed like living fire, shifting shapes that Garen couldn't decipher. He swallowed hard, hearing a distant voice, low, rough, like boulders grinding in a stream. "Be still, boy," it rumbled. Garen jolted his head to one side. Perched upon a basalt dais, illuminated by four molten braziers, were two dragons. One was scarlet, scales glittering like fresh blood in torchlight. The other was silver, each scale etched with faint constellations that shimmered as though reflecting 1,000 distant stars. Their wings were folded, but immense wingspans longer than the prison floor, and their talons were like curved glaives. The scarlet drake's eyes, molten gold flecks set in pools of obsidian, flickered with curiosity as it leaned forward. Garen's heart hammered so hard he thought they might jump right out of his chest. "Explain." The scarlet drake growled. Its voice was a cascade of rumbling thunder. One of the jailers, a squat, machine-augmented wretch, stepped forward and projected a holoslate into the air. Symbols schematized Garen's genetic profile. His rare psionic gene sequence was highlighted in crimson. The spark, Garen's throat went dry. He hadn't understood what that meant until now. "Human child." The silver dragon rasped. "Why hand him over to us?" The Vraxxer jailer's voice crackled as it spoke. "The boy is a potential psionic carrier. His genes could ignite insurgencies in Vraxxer-controlled sectors. High Command demands containment." Lyson, the silver-scaled one, tilted her head. "Containment or execution. He is an experiment." The jailer's voice wavered. "They wish to test our legendary warding prison." A snort of amusement or disdain rippled from Lyson's maw. "So the Vraxxer fear our wards. Let them test, but not here." She turned her gaze back to Garen. "Child of Earth, you stand before the dragon's prison by decree of the Vraxxer. Yet no Vraxxer dares seize you from these halls. Here, we dragons judge all matters of power." The scarlet drake blinked. "Then let us judge him. Does he bear the spark?" A second jailer produced a restraining harness and affixed it around Garen's chest. Pain flared as spiked nodes pressed into his ribcage. He gasped. The scarlet drake lowered its massive head till its snout hovered inches from Garen's face. Garen's brown eyes met the drake's molten gold irises. Spark, present. The dragon murmured, voice soft with wonder, yet dormant. Iron wards, Lyson whispered. Elements of fire and earth intertwined. You cannot hide your magnificence, little one. Garen's stomach twisted. He had no desire for magnificence, he just wanted to go home. But even as dread clenched his chest, he felt the faintest pulse of pride. Something deep inside hummed, awakened by these dragons' scrutiny. A single question formed in his mind, unbidden. If these colossal beings could sense his potential, what might he become? Lyson's wings rustled. Their bones clicked like distant thunder. Place the boy in the outer cells, she ordered. We shall convene the Council of Scales. His fate will be decided at dawn. Two jailers hauled Garen toward a jagged corridor lit by glowing phosphor lamps. The walls were etched with cave painting-style reliefs of dragons battling invaders beyond count. Garen traced the carvings with his eyes, imagining the clang of steel on claw and the sweep of a dragon's tail as cities burned. The flickering light made figures dance in the alcoves, memories of ancient wars carved in stone. His escort shoved him into a cell. It was small and bare, a narrow slab to sleep on, a rusted plasma grate for warmth, and chains bolted to the walls. The door clanged shut. Garen's heart pounded as the heavy lock clicked into place. The chains snapped like cursed vines, binding his wrists, ankles, and waist. He sagged to the floor, knees pressing into the cold stone. His breath came in ragged gasps. Tears he'd fought since the capture slipped down his cheeks. He'd always been a quiet boy, content with books and stargazing. Now he was a prisoner in a dragon's lair, torn from everything he knew. Minutes passed, or was it hours? The phosphor lamp overhead flickered, sputtered, and died, plunging Garen into near darkness. He squinted in the gloom and saw two forms. At the far end of the corridor, another prisoner, a slender figure wrapped in Zadrinian robes, and something vast behind them, scales, wings folded tight against stone. Every cell slammed shut with the echo of metal, leaving only that one silent corner lit by moonlight filtering through a narrow slitted window. PSST, hissed a voice, low, urgent. Female. Garen's pulse jolted. He crawled forward, dragging shackles across the floor. In the dim glow, he saw her clearly, a young woman. Dark-skinned, violet eyes gleaming with intelligence and fear. Silver runes were tattooed across her temples. I'm Kira, she whispered. Zadrinian rebel. Here for sedition. And you are? Garen, he replied, voice thick, human. Kira's lips curled in a relieved smile. You have the same spark the jailers fear. She nodded toward the shadow behind her. And Muvak, former gladiator, thought to have died in the arena of ash. He's our muscle. A soft growl rumbled from the darkness. Garen could just make out a hulking silhouette, muscular, reptilian muzzle, eyes that glowed faintly. Muvak's voice was deep as a mining drill. Welcome to the dragon's prison. I hope you like chains. Garen managed a weak laugh. Chains were all he knew now. But as Kira slipped closer and clasped his wrist, offering a scrap of flatbread, Garen realized that fear alone wouldn't break him. Not with allies here in the deep stone. Somewhere beyond those bronze gates, dragons slept in ancient halls. And somewhere in him, a spark flickered, hungry for purpose. He broke the flatbread in half, sharing it with Kira and Muvak, as though accepting initiation into a pact. In that stolen moment of camaraderie, Garen vowed, for his parents, for himself, for the spark that burned within, he would survive this prison, and one day, he would change the fate of the empire that cast him here. The clang of the iron gate echoed through the tunnel long after the guard's footsteps faded. In the flickering phosphor light, Garen Hale hesitated for a heartbeat, his chest still trembling from the first true taste of freedom since his capture. Beyond that gate lay the heart of the dragon's prison, the forge hall, where wormsteel was melted and reforged, where ancient wards were hammered into every bar and bolt. It was here that Garen's waking began. Kira slipped beside him, her violet eyes sharp in the gloom. Follow my lead, she murmured. "Keep your psionics quiet until Lysen commands. If you draw attention prematurely, the Vraxure will swoop in and we'll all be enslaved again." She moved like shadow, her slender frame weaving between steam vents and molten runnels. Muvak brought up the rear, a tower of sinew and scales, each step kicking up sparks from the heated stone. Their destination was a small alcove deep in the bowels of the prison, where the slaves' meager supplies were hidden: stolen crucibles, broken tongs, scraps of worm steel. There, Garen stood before the dull hulks of metal and closed his eyes. A low hum began in his mind, a vibration at first so faint he thought it was the prison's own heartbeat. Then, ever so gently, it grew. The metal shards on the table before him trembled, their surfaces rippling like water in a pond. Garen's pulse quickened, wonder and fear dancing in equal measure. "Breathe," Kira whispered, laying a cool hand on his shoulder. "Let the spark lead you." He exhaled, and the shards lifted, no more than an inch, but enough that he could feel their weightlessness. The glow in his chest flared, and for a moment, Garen saw the world in shimmering lines of force, the braided chains binding captives, the wards etched into the cavern walls, the molten braziers invisible currents. He tasted the song of dragons in the Forgefire, heard their deep voices humming in perfect harmony with his own psionic resonances. When he opened his eyes, the metal hovered in midair. Kira's breath caught. Muvak's draconic nostrils flared. Garen's fingers quivered as he lowered them gently back onto the table, as though laying sleeping children back in their crib. He had done it, controlled the spark. A roar shook the tunnels. Carrion bells clanged. Warning sirens blared. Garen froze, dread sliding down his spine. Kira snapped her fingers. Muvak crushed a stolen data pad underfoot. The alcove's entrance sealed behind them with a hiss, an automated warded door closing in response to the alarm. "They know," Garen whispered, panic rising. "They know I've used psionics." Kira's eyes narrowed. "Then we vanish." She pressed a hidden button, and a section of the wall slid aside to reveal a cramped crawlspace. Through here toward the dragon nesting caverns. They slipped through the tunnel, metal grit crunching beneath their feet. Garen's mind raced. He had never intended to draw attention so soon. But alongside fear lay exhilaration. His power was real, taught and guided by Lysen. It could unmake the prison. Yet still, he was a boy untried, untested, vulnerable. Moments later, they emerged into a vast dome carved of living stone. Glowing fungi clung to stalactites overhead, casting a spectral light onto great nests of bone and iron. Dragon eggs, some nearly rock-hard, others soft as warm marble, clustered in alcoves. Between them, sleeping worms coiled like living statues. "They trust us," Muvak murmured, his voice a low growl, "because we haven't betrayed them." His reptilian eyes roved the nests as though reading ancient prophecy in their shapes. "We must move quickly, alert Lysen before the Vrax arrive." Ahead, a massive silhouette shifted. One dragon opened her eyes, the silver-scaled High Warden. Herself, Lysen rose, her great wings unfurling in a thunderclap that rattled the dome. The ground quaked beneath Garen's feet. Steam spiraled around Lysen's snout as she inhaled, nostrils flaring. "Impressive," she rumbled, voice echoing off living rock. "You awakened beneath wings, boy, yet the prison trembles at your touch." Garen swallowed, voice catching. "I didn't mean to draw the alarms." Lysen's eyes, pale as starlight, softened. "None here blame you. The spark is our heritage as much as yours. Come." She stepped aside, revealing a narrower corridor carved into the dome wall. "We press deeper. There is knowledge you must learn before you claim power." They followed Lysen into the heart of the nesting caverns, where walls glimmered with veins of wormglass and crystallized dragonflight energy. At its center stood an obelisk hewn from living bone, inscribed with dragon song runes older than any empire. Lysen placed a clawed foot before it. The runes flared with pale light. "Dragon, wards are woven from mind and matter alike," Lysen intoned. "Here, we anchor the prison's magic. In time, you will learn to inscribe your own wards stronger than bronze and brighter than starfire. But first, understanding." She turned her head toward Kira and Muvak. "Remove his chains." To guardians, humanoid dragons clad in warded Armor stepped forward and snapped the shackles from Garen's wrists and ankles. For the first time since his capture, Garen flexed his hands freely, spine tingling with relief. Lysen watched his movements like a sculptor inspecting marble. Kira offered him water from a carved crystal flask. Garen drank greedily. The cool liquid soothed the burn in his throat. Muvek nodded approvingly. Even dragons do not allow helplessness to persist. Lysen's gaze drifted to the obelisk. Place your hands upon the rune-carved bone. Garen obeyed, feeling its subtle warmth beneath his palms. In that moment, memories not his own flooded his mind. Dragons soaring between starlit worlds, forging pacts with long-dead empires, binding magic and metal into living cities. He felt the heartbeat of Dravik Prime itself, the forests thrumming with life, the molten depths churning with creation. It was breathtaking and overwhelming. With a single thought, Garen allowed the visions to settle. The obelisk's runes glowed brighter, as though recognizing him. Lysen bowed her head in respect. The dragon's legacy welcomes you, Spark-bearer. A distant tremor rattled the obelisk. Garen braced himself. The prison itself seemed to respond to his presence. He realized, with equal parts awe and terror, that he was no longer merely an inmate. He was the keystone upon which the prison and perhaps the fate of an empire rested. Lysen laid a wing over his shoulders. Your training begins at dawn. Rest now, human child. Tomorrow, we awaken the full measure of your gift. As Kira and Muvak led him back toward the nesting alcove, Garen cast one last glance at the obelisk and the sleeping dragons around it. Under the ghost light of ancient magic, he understood that exile had become rebirth and that tomorrow would bring trials no human had ever faced. Yet within him, the spark burned brighter than ever, guiding him toward an uncertain destiny. The first light of dawn seeped through fissures high in the cavern ceiling, painting the nesting dome in molten gold. Garen awoke on a bed of woven drake hide, the tang of sulfur still in his lungs. Beside him, Kira unlatched her pack and withdrew. A brittle parchment scrawled with hastily drawn maps. Muvak prowled nearby, flexing his claws as though sharpening blades in the air. Lysen's contours shimmered at the rim of the cavern, her wings half-raised in anticipation. As the High Warden approached, the air around her crackled with dragon magic and energy Garen had helped awaken the night before. She regarded them with calm ferocity. Today we forge destiny, Lysen intoned. The Vraxure will descend upon us like locusts, but before they breach these caverns, you must sever the prison's heart. She dipped a wingtip toward the swirling runes of the obelisk. When it falls, the warding spells will collapse, and every chain across Dravik Prime will shatter. Garen rose, muscles stiff, but mind alight. His training had taught him to wield the spark, but Lysen's lessons had ignited his confidence. He stepped forward and laid both hands on the obelisk's bone-white surface. The ancient runes glowed in response, pulsing like a heartbeat. He closed his eyes and let his psionic senses slide along each glyph, feeling their purpose to bind dragon magic, human will, and alien technology into an unbreakable seal. Round him, the warding lines flickered. Garen drew the energy inward, channeling it through his body. His arms grew warm. The linings of his veins shimmered with power. He imagined the obelisk severed at its base, the runes unraveling like threads in a tapestry. With a sudden thrust of will, he withdrew his hands. The obelisk shuddered. Cracks spidered across its surface. Kira's breath caught. Muvak's claws scraped the stone floor. Lysen's eyes shone with pride and with warning. Good, Lysen murmured, but the heart will not fall by will alone. You must strike it with dragon steel and psionic force in unison. From hidden alcoves, guardians presented them with weapons, a lance tipped with wormsteel, a blade of living bronze, and a square of dragon leather warded to resist psionic backlash. Garen claimed the bronze sword, feeling its weight hum in tune with his own energies. They moved in silence through the labyrinthine tunnels, every corridor alive with warded glyphs. Steam hissed from vents. Mechanical guardians clanked patrolling routes. Garen's mind danced between ward and blade, dissolving barriers with thought as Kira disabled the machines with her deft hands, and Muvak plowed through gates of iron. At last they reached the nexus chamber, an immense cavern at the prison's core, ringed by four towering pylons that funneled energy from the Heartstone, suspended above a central dais. The Heartstone was a riot of shifting colors, like a galaxy condensed into a gemstone. Runes carved in glowing script spiraled around it, sending pulses of magic through the pylons into the wards that maintained the prison. The Vraxer alarms had sounded hours ago. The chamber was crowded with armored soldiers and their lieutenant, a monstrous Vraxer named Brathic, whose ridged skull gleamed in the torchlight. He barked orders, and the soldiers readied plasma rifles and warhammers. Dragons and their human puppet. Brathic snarled when he spotted Lyson's silhouette at the cavern entrance. "Surrender. Beast, your reign ends this day." Lyson's wings unfurled with a thunderous crack. Behind her, dozens of dragon inmates rose to their feet, scales glinting in every hue: onyx, emerald, ivory. Motes of ember and ash drifted from their nostrils. Garen felt the air tremble with their collective power. Beside him, Kira knocked a fractured dragonbone arrow to her wrist-mounted bow. Muvak flexed both fists, each knuckle plate glinting with warded steel. Garen's heart roared in his chest. "Now," Lyson bellowed. The Vraxer opened fire. Plasma bolts hissed through the air, striking pylons and sparking against scale. Dragons charged, and the chamber exploded in chaos. Garen surged forward. Blade aloft, he thrust the bronze sword into the base of the obelisk, his psionic spark flaring through the metal hilt into his arms. Brathic charged toward him, warhammer raised. Garen held his ground, summoning a field of force around the sword. The hammer struck with bone-shaking impact, but the wards held. Garen channeled the blow back into Brathic's gauntlet. In a flash of blinding light, the lieutenant flew backward, crashing into a pillar. Kira loosed her arrow. It streaked through the air, igniting in psionic flame and buried itself in the Heartstone's casing. The gemstone tilted on its energy axis, threatening to fall. Muvak roared, launching himself at the remaining soldiers, scattering them like rag dolls. Garen focused on the obelisk. He buried the sword to the hilt and called upon every shred of power he possessed. Dragon magic he'd never known he carried, the raw spark of psionics, and the memory of his parents' love that had sustained him through terror. The obelisk cracked along its runes, fissures racing upward like lightning. From above, the Heartstone wavered and then shattered, shards of living crystal raining down. A shockwave of magic tore through the chamber. The pylons exploded in showers of sparks. The wards binding them dissolved, and the prison's enchantments flooded outward. In the deafening aftermath, the Vraxer soldiers dropped their weapons and fled in panic. Dragons lifted their heads, roaring in triumphant approval. Garen staggered out of the chamber, the sword's metal still warm in his grasp, his body trembling from the release of power. Lyson landed beside him, her taloned foot cracking stone. She inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of freedom. "You have done what even we dragons could not," she said, voice thick with pride. "You have broken the prison." Garen sank to one knee, exhaustion washing over him, round him. Dragons roared their victory, and the shattering wards sent echoes racing through Dravik Prime. Kira knelt beside him, pressing a cooling hand to his brow. "You were amazing," she whispered, awe bright in her violet eyes. Muvak rumbled a laugh that shook the chamber. "You decide the Empire's fate indeed, human boy." Garen looked around at the liberated dragons, at Lyson's proud wings, at Kira's fierce smile, and felt a surge of determination. He had destroyed the prison's heart, but the war was far from over. Ahead lay the Vraxer Armada, the broken worlds under their yoke, and the fragile hope of a new alliance. Raising his sword, Garen felt the spark blaze within him once more. "Then let us finish this," he said, voice steady, "for Dravik Prime and for every world in chains." In that moment, as dragons rallied around him and the corridors of the prison lay open like the pages of destiny, Garen Hale stepped into his role not as a captive, but as the harbinger of revolution. The uprising had begun. The roar of dragon wings shook the shattered spires of the dragon's prison. As dawn's pale light filtered through the broken roof, Garen Hale stood atop the highest rampart, bronze sword in hand, surveying the transformed courtyard below. What had once been a place of chains and darkness now thrummed with life. Dragons freed and emboldened rallied around him. Kira issued orders to clustered Zadrinian rebels. Muvak organized the liberated prisoners into guard formations. Even the Vraxar jailers, those rigid silhouettes of pale fear, now knelt at the feet of their former captors, tools of the Empire. Disarmed, but beyond the prison's walls, the war still awaited. High above, the Vraxar armada loomed a phalanx of obsidian dreadnoughts, dozens strong, blotting out the sky like a plague cloud. Admiral Varay's flagship, the Sovereign's Wrath, led the formation, its forward batteries poised to reduce Dravik Prime to ash. Garen felt the tremor of its engines deep in his bones. The moment of reckoning had come. Remember, Lyson's voice rumbled at his side. Our victory here is but the first step. Beyond that field of stars lies the Vraxar throne world. If we do not strike boldly now, they will regroup and enslave more worlds than ever. Garen nodded, sharpening his resolve. He glanced at Kira, whose violet eyes burned with fierce determination, and at Muvak, whose broad shoulders and steady stance promised unwavering support. Then he raised his sword high, its blade catching the light as though it bore its own flame. People of Dravik Prime, dragons, rebellion brothers and sisters. Garen's voice echoed through the courtyard's speakers, bolstered by stolen Vraxar amplifiers. Today, we stand not as prisoners, but as avengers of tyranny. The Vraxar sought to break our spirits with fear and fire, yet they freed the spark within us. Dragons, lift your wings. Rebellion, sound your horns. Let every star know that the era of chains is over. A deafening chorus of roars, cries, and triumphant cheers answered him. Garen felt the spark within his chest swell, coursing through his limbs and seeding hope in every heart present. At a nod from Lyson, the dragon surged skyward in a living storm of scales and flame. Kira led the ground forces through the open gates, flanking the dreadnought's bombardment zones. Muvak charged beside her, every step cracking stone as he rallied the prisoners into shield walls and demolition squads. Garen and Lyson soared above, diving toward the Sovereign's Wrath on a direct collision course. Energy bolts arced between dragonfire lances and plasma turrets. As Drakes slammed into Vraxar fighters, Garen focused his psionic sight, probing the dreadnought's shields for weakness. Deep within its hull, the main generator glowed like a black star, the heart of the flagship's power. He extended his mind, weaving words he'd learned from the obelisk, and hurled a bolt of pure psionic force. The dreadnought shuddered as its shields flickered and collapsed in one quadrant. Lyson surged forward, together with Muvak's crashing Warhammer and Kira's shattering arrow, and backed by the thunder of 100 dragon wings. They breached the hull. The Sovereign's Wrath groaned as its plating split open. Garen planted his sword into the generator's core, channeling dragon magic and psionic flame until the core imploded in a supernova of energy. The flagship listed, systems ablaze, then broke apart in a glorious explosion visible even from orbit. The rest of the armada faltered, fear rippling through the ranks. Dragon's dove, picking off crippled ships one by one. On the ground, the rebellion surged through Vraxar outposts, shattering command bunkers and freeing enslaved workers. Hours later, the sky cleared of enemy vessels. Dravik Prime's triumphant inhabitants stood amid the ruins of the prison and the smoking remains of the Vraxar fleet. Garen landed gracefully beside Lyson, their wings folding in sync. The High Warden turned to him, pride shining in her starlit eyes. You have decided the Empire's fate, as promised, but this victory, as you know, is not the end. It is the beginning of something greater. Garen sheathed his sword and lifted a hand to the gathering crowd. Today, we proved that unity of species, not force of arms, is the true power of the galaxy. Dragons, Terrans, Zadrinians, and even the dissenting Vraxar among us, together we broke the chains of oppression. Let this be our oath: no world shall ever bend to conquest again. We will form a council of free worlds. Every voice will be heard, every life will matter. A roar of approval rose, echoing among the mountains. Kira stepped forward, placing a hand on Garen's shoulder. You speak for more than just one planet, Garen Hale. You speak for hope. Muvak thumped his chest, grinning. You have given all of us purpose. The galaxy will remember this day. Lyson unfurled her greatest wingspan. Then let us bear witness to the birth of this new alliance. With a guttural cry, she breathed a plume of stardust silver fire that arched across the sky like a banner dot as the dragons answered in unison, painting the heavens with primordials of flame and magic. Garen realized the true weight of his decision. He had been cast into darkness by aliens who feared his potential end here. In the heart of a dragon's realm, he had harnessed that spark to forge a new legacy. Above the ruined prison, beneath the heraldry of dragonfire, Garen Hale once, a frightened boy, now stood as the harbinger of a brighter era. With dragons at his side and freedom in his heart, he had decided the Empire's fate, handwritten the first chapter of a galaxy united.